I know that in South Africa there's, in retrospect, a lot of consideration that the victory over apartheid was, of course, very limited, but because in part of the focus on human rights in the civil and political way, but not the social and economic aspects of it. So I guess my question has to do with that. I guess that would relate to both the class-based as well as an expanded insights now about liberalism. You referred a number of times to liberalism, and there certainly are any number of analyses now that question the narrowness and the distortions of liberalism, for not including that, the social and economic, so internet related now to the huge environmental threats, which are certainly a huge threat in the Middle East, that will require regional kinds of administration, simply just because of the huge water loss.
Okay, it's a very, very tough question that has faced revolutions, freedom movements for decades, I think. What do progressive elements in a liberation movement do? How do you bring in the socio-economic agenda while the focus is mainly on liberation? And as a progressive person, of course, and as I was talking over dinner before we came here, we have the Algerian example before us, not just South Africa. I'll come to South Africa. In the Algerian case, social economic justice was delayed, but let's get liberation first and foremost, and then we'll deal with that. And they never dealt with that. And they will never deal with that. If it's not part of the revolution, it will never come later. So we understand that fully. Now, do you do that in every form of struggle? Or do you have different fronts where you lead your struggles? This is the question that I was trying to refer to. So it's a dilemma. We can make the BDS National Committee, the huge coalition that's leading this global BDS movement, much more progressive. But then we'll be much, much smaller. And we'll have a very good progressive agenda that connects with the best of the social movements and women's agenda, everything, on the whole spectrum of socio-cultural economic issues. But then it'll be much smaller movement, and it'll be much, much less effective. When I say it's a liberal agenda, I did not mean it in what's currently being used as liberal in the West, to mean that unchain those companies, those multinationals to do what they want and destroy the environment and so on. I did not mean it in that sense. I meant with the good old traditional sense of liberalism, respect for the law that applies to everyone, equality, democracy, human rights, that type. Now I know this has no basis if you don't discuss economic and social justice, and the progressives of us in the movement are not ignoring that. We just choose not to do it there in order not to destroy this huge unity, particularly in a situation where we have complete fragmentation of the Palestinian people. Israel has succeeded largely in fragmenting us. Gaza, West Bank, Jerusalem, 48, the refugees, diaspora, I mean, we are so fragmented. The BDS National Committee is one place, the BDS movement is one place where we have a massive Palestinian consensus and on a very good agenda, very solid agenda. And we do the other stuff elsewhere, not necessarily here. On South Africa, absolutely. If there's one lesson we learned after freedom was that political freedom is not enough. When you still can't own your land, when you're still enslaved economically, you still have economic apartheid, of course. And we recognize that in South Africa. And that is the harshest lesson we learned from the South African experience, how not to fall into that trap. But again, I want to distinguish, the BDS movement is not the Palestinian liberation movement. We cannot become the Palestinian liberation movement. We are part of that movement. We cannot cover the entire spectrum. The other stuff is up to political parties, which are currently dearly lacking, but we need political parties to retake that struggle again.
Thank you very much.